Well, everybody, you voted, and I've got the results right here. Now, I didn't get quite as many votes as I would have liked, but there were 2 clear frontrunners, and I've got an idea what other games you want me to review in the future. So, my sincere thanks to all of you for voting, providing feedback, and suggestions for my crappy little review series. In fact, I'll even do the runner-up as my next review, just 'cause I like ya. So, now for the winner. This time, I will take a look back at... Oh, screw you guys!
In the city, time one more vodka and lime to help paralyze that tiny little tick,
There was a ton of buzz around this game when it was in development. The idea behind it was to combine classic platforming gameplay with parkour moves in a first-person perspective. Parkour, or freerunning, is simply the practice of moving through an environment as efficiently as possible. We've seen similar gameplay to this in Prince of Persia and even a little from Assassin's Creed, but those were all third-person action games. And besides having this cool element, EA also put out this addictive demo for the game. Remember demos? Those things developers used to make to get you interested in a game you never heard of and entice you to buy the full version? Yeah, I remember when they used to come out before the game was released, or when they weren't giving us pre-order bonuses. Yeah, those were good times. Well, the final product came out and it was slammed by wall-to-wall bad reviews, a disappointing runtime of only 5 hours, a steep difficulty curve, and old arguments about Idranbis. Oh, sorry, that's my word for Electronic Arts Digital Rights Management bullshit, or EADRMBS. Basically, the whole thing was a mess. The game sold decently enough that there are reports of a sequel in the works, so hopefully we'll find something here that makes it worth a sequel. So the game starts off in this beautiful but oddly colored city, which is never given a name. The player takes the role of Faith, a runner, which is some kind of organization of secret rooftop couriers. Faith's delivery attracts the attention of some police who seem far too eager to turn an unarmed woman into Swiss cheese, so she contacts her sister who happens to be a cop. Unfortunately, she's just been framed for killing a mayoral candidate and a family friend, so Faith now has to run from the cops, clear her sister's name, and figure out who's behind this mystery. Most of the gameplay revolves around running and platforming puzzles. This is a ton of fun, with a lot of cool tricks and stunts you need to learn to navigate your environments without going splat. Unfortunately, you will go splat. You will go splat very often. You will lose track of how many times you will miss a jump, or run into open space, or just accidentally fall and end up booted back to an earlier checkpoint. Since this game is a console port, you have to rely on its checkpoint system for your saved games, and you aren't allowed to save before attempting a tricky jump, so you'll have to repeat a lot of jumping and climbing to get back to where you died. Why can't developers just give us PC users a simple quick save button? Anyway, oftentimes you'll have trouble figuring out where you're supposed to go and have to slow down to find it, which kills both your and the game's momentum. If you try to keep moving the whole time like the game wants, you'll likely have to make a blind jump and end up plummeting to the pavement below. Other times you're being chased by the cops, which adds a sense of danger to the events but puts a severe strain on the gameplay. It forces you to make your jumps and maneuvers much faster to avoid being shot. If you can't figure out where you're supposed to go fast enough, the cops catch and kill you, or they shoot you in mid-jump, ruining your momentum and leading to another falling death. At some point the developers must have thought that running from the cops all the time would get boring, and since they were making a first-person game, it would be alright if they put in some combat and shooting action. This system is outright terrible. Faith is unarmed, which means she often has to engage her enemies in hand-to-hand combat, which is decidedly not in your favor. Your best chance to survive is to pull off a disarm move, which is a quick-time event that allows you to knock out your enemy and take his gun. You have a reflex time action you can take, which slows down time and makes it easier for you to grab the enemy's gun in the nanosecond the game gives you to take it. When Faith has a gun, not only does she run slower, but she can't do any of her parkour moves, and she's not a very good shot. Seemingly the game just wants you to disable the enemies and keep running, but oftentimes this is impossible as you have no idea where to go and the big men with guns will cut you off from the exit, making it necessary to kill several peacekeepers before you can stop and find your way out. It's like they couldn't design levels in a way that gave players the ability to outmaneuver the police, so they put a combat system into the game instead. The combat wouldn't be so bad if there was an element of stealth to it, being able to jump a guard and then take off before his friends knew what was happening. But almost every time the cops came after me, they homed in on my exact position and riddled the surrounding area with gunfire. The only time I remember shaking the cops was in the mall level, and I dropped down between two rent-a-cops who had their backs to me. But there was a plate of glass in the way, so by the time I smashed through it, the guards and their heavily armed friends were alerted to my location. Ugh. The mall level. This is the most frustrating level by far. Having to move from rooftop running to an indoor setting just feels wrong, and it's not helped that you start the level by dropping down to street level right in front of a police barricade you knew was there. Then you run up onto an elevated train track, and if you're not paying attention, you can get creamed by the train. The jumps in this area are so frustrating because the cops are only a few seconds behind you, so you have almost no time to try and discern the correct and safe paths. This is also the first time you get into real direct combat with the SWAT officers, and trying to disarm or knock them out is near impossible without a lot of fatal trial and error. Remember when I announced the Viewer's Choice video and mentioned this game made me rage quit? This is the part I was talking about. This jump requires just the right amount of speed, momentum, and timing to get it right, but you're trying to do it while under fire from two SMG packing SWATs at the bottom of the escalator. Even if you somehow survive the drop from missing the jump, the cops will make a corpse out of you, so it's automatically a fail. And all this footage you see is from me attempting it on a replay. Imagine trying this one jump 30 times in a row, continually being bumped back to this earlier checkpoint, steadily growing more and more frustrated with each failure. Yeah, you would rage quit too. My runner-up, no pun intended, for worst level is this one, where you do nothing but climb an unfinished building's atrium. This level is so boring and frustrating because you're just going from scaffold to scaffold, increasing the risk of falling death with each jump. And it's also you can get to a window where another runner left you a rifle so you can take out the police convoy carrying Faith's sister and rescue her. Now, honest question. If the runner could get there and drop off the rifle, why couldn't they stick around to take the shot instead? I mean, Faith just goes down to street level to rescue Kate, so wouldn't it make sense for her to be waiting at street level? Why have her spend all that time climbing up just to run back down again? It's like this level was designed purely to waste the player's time. The game actually throws a boss fight at you on the boat level, and I assume the idea was to knock them out. Unfortunately, my enemy never seemed to get tired or even fazed by my hits, and eventually I got headbutted into oblivion. Turns out what I was supposed to do was to try and disarm them, which is even more difficult than disarming the SWAT guys. And then they take off for a half-decent but really hard chase scene, and then you have to repeat the fight again. And all this just leads to a cutscene where they escape. Even if you're not in combat, the game likes to screw with you by adding death traps. Sometimes you'll come across an electric fence, which looks nearly identical to a normal fence, and touching it for too long leads to death. Of course, when you're full-on running, it looks identical to all the other safe fences. And why the hell would someone electrify a rooftop fence? Does the building owner just hate birds that much? There are also some indoor traps like this steam vent. How was I supposed to know this would kill me? You can't even see it when you're on the ladder. It's a dirty trick, that's all it is, hiding the valve for it where you're not going to be looking. Okay, I should probably stop ranting about the gameplay. It's bad, but there are always people who can look past that if the game has good story and atmosphere. Unfortunately, Mirror's Edge screws those up too. I have mixed feelings about the game's graphics. As you've probably seen from this game footage, the designers chose a very limited palette of colors for the game world. Most everything is white with accents of green, orange, blue, or red for buildings and such. Red is often used as a visual cue for the player that it's where they should be going, or that they can interact with the object while running. This works great for gameplay and the game aesthetic, but unfortunately there are problems with the graphics that make this a problem as well. You'll see a lot of blurring and bloom being used to simulate sunlight and motion while running, which makes it hard to see things in critical moments. Combined with the first-person view, the idea was to make the player feel like they were playing as Faith, and you're seeing everything through a real person's eyes. But the bloom combined with all the white glossy textures just makes everything seem artificial and hard to see. Plus, the constant white makes all the spots and smudges on my monitor stand out. What? I had a cold last week. The first-person perspective of the game is also a sticky subject. It's definitely more immersive than the regular third-person view in most platformers, but the way some of the levels are laid out, you have to stop and look around to figure out where you are and where you should be going, breaking the flow. It's nice that there's a look hint button that swivels your view to where you should try to get to next, but often you won't see how you're supposed to get there. Add the fact that you'll probably be under fire from the police while you're looking for your next jump just makes it all the more frustrating. And it's hard to get a sense of fear when being chased from the first-person perspective because stopping to look around often gets you shot. It's crazy how often you're getting shot at. Faith dodges more machine gun fire in this game than Schwarzenegger did in his entire movie career. The biggest problem with this game is that there's not nearly enough story. There are games that tell too much story until you get sick of it, and there are some games that tell you just enough story to keep you involved but maintain some mystery. But Mirror's Edge is just lacking in fundamental story elements. Where the hell are we? Is this a dystopian society or not? Who are the runners, and what are they carrying that gets them so much heat from the police? And who are they transporting it for? Now, I don't have any gripes about the character of Faith besides her cop-killing habits, but that's mostly because we're just not given enough details to care about her one way or the other. Developers, if you want us to get involved with the game's story, you need to tell us what's going on, where we are, why people don't like the runners, why the cops are so trigger-happy, etc. Even with the heavy focus on running, the game forces you to slow down for annoyingly long sections when you're crawling around in air ducts or just standing in an elevator. In almost every mission, you're faced with a tedious elevator ride where you just sit and wait for ridiculous amounts of time. Remember how people complained about the elevator scenes in Mass Effect? This is worse by far, because you don't even get any decent scenery, just a looping news story on a small screen. Come on, guys, can we at least get a little chat between Faith and her support character, or some elevator music? The game's mystery plot is more than a little disappointing. It turns out some private security firm wants to replace the city police, so they frame Kate to make the cops look bad, and do you even care? We have no investment in the story, no frame of reference, no reason to care about the characters involved or hate the supposed bad guys. The only character I really liked was Miller, Kate's boss, because what's not to love about a guy in an all-white suit who rocks 2 guns? Plus, he kind of looks like Gary Oldman.
This comms unit and head for the roof. It's where they've taken Kate. I'll contact you when it's safe. I'll hold them off. The roof. Go! Now!
Aw, can't I play as him instead? The voice acting in the game is solid, and the overall presentation works. The in-game cutscenes are good, but between levels you have these animated scenes. It's a nice change of style, but I keep expecting it to turn into an Esurance ad. I will also add that the music is fantastic. I could listen to the soundtrack of this game just doing chores around the house or while playing other games. The really fun parts of this game are when you're not being chased by the cops, when you're free to roam around and find a path your own way. The game doesn't give you this freedom nearly often enough. But beyond the disappointing main game, there are races you can compete in against yourself or your friends. And the game records your movements and actions, so the next time you play a racetrack, it has a ghost image of your best time run that you can race against. I'll give the game a point for that feature because it's just so cool, and it adds a little more value to the game beyond its disappointing story mode. I went online to see if there were any good mods or user-made extras for the game, but I didn't find much. Mostly more user-made racetracks. Some people have done some nice machinima pieces, but apart from that, there's not much of a modder scene I could find. Overall, Mirror's Edge just feels way too short and unbalanced in its gameplay. Like many have already said, it was an experiment in putting hardcore platforming into a first-person perspective, and in the end, it doesn't work. It's a very polished game with more extra features than you get from most titles, but the core game doesn't seem worthy of all that effort. If the developers had taken the time to develop the story, the setting, the characters, and didn't force you into awkward shooter combat, this would have been a much better game that might have been worth its original $50 price tag. Heck, I don't even think it's worth $10. Maybe you could pick it up if Steam marks it down for $5, but don't say I didn't warn you. Looks like I'm gonna need to recruit some minions for my next review. See you later.